Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial video of the PMDG Boeing 737 for Microsoft Flight Simulator. I'm Emmanuel, I am a Boeing 737 pilot and a member of PMDG's tech team. In this video I'm going to show you how to land the 737. Please watch it in conjunction with the landing theory video that I have just uploaded prior to this one, and which you can also find linked in the description below. One final note before we start to actually fly the airplane. I had to pause my simulator on the previous video on the final approach to do my theoretical explanation, and unfortunately Microsoft Flight Simulator didn't really like the pausing, and therefore when we pick up the video the airplane will be slightly out of trim and I'll have to disconnect the autopilot and just manually re-establish the approach configuration. So don't be surprised if it looks a little messy in the beginning, but do take note then when I'm flying the airplane down how easy it is to re-establish it on final. And the trick of what I'm doing here is I'm setting the correct pitch attitude, I'm setting the correct thrust, and with that set, the airplane is just slowly coming back onto the profile. So just take it as an example of how to restabilize it in case something goes wrong on your approach, and don't necessarily see it as a flight simulator issue here. Alright, this set, let's get done and fly the airplane. So here we are. As I told you, I just have to disconnect here because that simulator really doesn't like the pause. So now that we're established, note the pitch around 2 degrees, the thrust around 50% here. Plus 100 is checked.
Minimums.
Continue. Note how I'm just very slightly changing the pitch in order to keep the glide slope here.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
Okay, thrust goes normal. We have 83%, 100 knots, 80 knots, manual braking, auto brake disarm, 60 knots. Take it back to idle reverse and keep it in idle reverse until you have vacated the runway. Again, this is very important, keep it in idle reverse, because if you needed to activate the reverses again, you'd have them available. Even here, when you're vacating the on the taxiway, and it might be slippery, there might be fresh snow on the taxiways, you need the reversers. Alright, now that we're safely at taxi speed, we can stow the reverse, vacate the runway completely, make sure the entire airplane is beyond the line. And only once the entire airplane is beyond the line you can stop the aircraft. But ideally, especially if you're flying online, try to get the airplane off the exit so that the airplane beyond you will be able to vacate the runway as well. When you're on the taxiway, again in real life we try to keep the airplane rolling and not to stop after the runway, of course assuming air traffic control clearances permit. Then we're going to clean the airplane up, and personally I've just adopted a 3-3-3-3 rule there, and that is going down to the pedestal. Number 1, transponder alt off. Number 2, retract the flaps. Number 3, reset the trim to 4 units. And then it's the captain's role to stow the speed brake. The next one is on the main panel. Auto brakes off, system display, and turn off the approach mode on the ISFD or on the analog standby instrument. Moving further on to the MCP, number 1, the flight director, number 2, the altitude, number 3, the airspeed. And here's a small trick. If you put the right flight director off and then press level change several times, then sometimes, note sometimes, the MCP speed is just going down to 100 and you don't have to scroll on it. Well, that is something, some airplanes do it, other airplanes don't, and sometimes even the same airplane on several sectors on the same day doesn't do it all the time. And that is something PMDG has modeled, and I just love them for it. And then the second flight director goes off. And looking at the overhead panel, number 2 the position light, number 1 the probe heat, number 2 the position light, number 3 the start switches. And that's your after landing flow complete. So you've got 3 items down here on the paddles and thrust lever quadrant, 3 items on the main panel, 3 on the MCP, and 3 on the overhead. And that is the shutdown flow of the pilot monitoring. The pilot flying is going to stow the speed brakes, and that's usually happening automatically if you put the thrust up again after landing. And then of course turn off the landing lights, turn on the taxi light. We're here in Dublin, and we'll make our way to the gate. Let me just quickly show you that as well. Sorry, I just have to reload the flight here on the Navigraph app. Here we are, Dublin. So we're going to go via Mike 2. Sorry, of course, that's via Whiskey 2. First one over here. I'm sorry, I need to be a bit more gentle on the tiller. And by the way, note how wide the turn is over here. If you have a turn as wide as this, that you can steer using only nose wheel steering, then you can go faster than the 10 knots. That's generally if a turn is 45 degrees or less. But if only using the rudder pedal nose wheel steering is sufficient for the turn, then you can go faster than 10 knots. But don't overdo it. If in any doubt, 10 knots, and you're safe in all turns. Alright, approaching runway 34, clear left, clear right, and we're clear to cross. Put the strobe lights on whenever you're crossing an active runway. Just in case both you and air traffic control have missed an aircraft on the approach or takeoff from, that might alert that aircraft that you are actually attempting to cross that runway. And once your whole aircraft is entirely clear of the line, you can turn the strobe lights back off. Next up the parking chart. I'm going via Foxtrot inner taxiway here, then to the right and to the apron taxiway, and we'll take gate number 124 today. Note that I've kept the APU off for now, and that's because if you start the APU right after landing, again, the APU is using a bit of fuel there, and it doesn't seem a lot on your flight, but keep in mind there are 200,000 civil aircraft flying every day. If everyone is doing it, you can save quite a bit of fuel, and therefore also quite a bit of emissions. However, the APU takes about a minute to run up, so when you are approaching your gate, make sure to turn it on in time that you actually have the APU up and running by the time you actually reach your gate. The other thing, single engine taxi, but I'm going to cover that in a separate tutorial. Because again, with single engine taxi you can save some fuel. Alright, we are approaching gate 124, so we're going to turn off the lights. If it's dark and you don't see a lot, you can of course keep them on. But you do want to turn them off by the time you're getting into the gate, in order not to blind anyone in there. Keep the speed slow while you're turning into the gate. There is really no need to rush here. 3 knots, 4 knots, you can also do 5 knots, but don't overdo it. Generally, when you're on the gate, check those red lines. Or over here it's the white lines. You don't want any equipment standing inside there. Again here, you'd normally have a marshaller, or you'd have a guidance system that's going to guide you in. Don't have it here unfortunately in the simulator, so we'll just have to stop the airplane ourselves. Right, we're at the gate, the APU is available, put it on the bus. Again, keep in mind, you always have to put the APU generator on the bus yourself in the 737. Set the parking brake, then we have 2 blue, 1 red. Show up the engine display. Engine's dead. And this shall complete today's tutorial. I'm going to show you the shutdown flow on the very next one. Thank you very much for joining, and I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen so far.